Welcome into another edition of the Cornhusker Huddle. I am your host, Brian Moore. Today we're diving into the secondary and how that room looks under new leadership. Addison Williams is coming over from UCF as your defensive backs coach, and former defensive backs coach John Butler, we know, is now the new defensive coordinator for the Blackshirts. Today's episode, though, we're starting off on the hot topic of the last 36 hours or so. Nebraska has fired special teams coordinator Ed Foley after a disastrous and utter failure of 2024. Ed Foley, I'm surprised, lasted this long. Nebraska's numbers in 2024 in terms of key indicators for good to terrible special teams play are just staggering when you look at them. And we're getting ready to dive into them. Out of 134 teams, Nebraska special teams under Ed Foley overall rank 115th. Blocked punts, 134th. Blocked punts allowed, 132nd. Blocked kicks, the one area Nebraska had remote success in, they finished 27th. Kickoff return defense, Nebraska finished at 103rd. Kickoff returns, 98th. Net punting, 116th. Punt return defense, 111th. Punt returns, 109th. Field goal percentage was 95th. And it's hard to blame the field goal percentage entirely on the kickers when you have a long snapper who can't snap the damn ball. He's got one job, and he couldn't do it. Nebraska head coach Matt Rule said, "We've got the guy to fix special teams." That guy was Ed Foley. That guy is now fired. Nebraska's got another coordinator opening on staff. We're going into 2025 with a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, and a new special teams coordinator. That's a little concerning, although I do like Dana Holgorsen at offensive coordinator. Nebraska has to nail the special teams coordinator hire. We cannot allow a special teams unit to cost Nebraska games again. They damn near costed us the bowl victory. They costed us the win against Iowa. We had a bad snap on John Hull's missed field goal. We had a punt returner who's been here for 6 freaking years, call fair catches, he's falling to the ground, touch it, didn't touch it, we don't know. All we know is the special teams unit around him thought he touched it, and so they all go scrambling for the ball, and we end up touching it. Iowa recovers, gets the ball at like the 4 or 5 yard line. It costed us the game. It costed us multiple games. We had 2 blocked field goals against Purdue. We had a blocked PAT versus Boston College. They ran it back for 2. The blocked punt against Boston College, they recovered at like the 3. The special teams unit in the Boston College game gave up 8 points, 8 of 15. They dang near costed us multiple games this season. Nebraska won 7 games in spite of a disaster, embarrassment, failure of a special teams unit. They should have won 9, maybe even 10. On the season, Nebraska had 10 kicks blocked. 10. That's almost every other game Nebraska was having a kick blocked. It's unbelievable. John Hull's back at kicker next season. So is Tristan Alvano after he comes back from a season-ending injury. John Hull, at least for me, from my perspective, once he settled in, he was a pretty solid option at kicker. He drilled the 54-yarder against Ohio State with plenty of room to spare. When he had a decent snap, when Buschini wasn't have to pick the damn ball up off the ground, place it, spin the laces out, when he didn't have to do all that, when the long snapper did the bare minimum of his job, John Hull was a good option at kicker. Tristan Alvano struggled early in his freshman season, but like John Hull, once he settled in, was a really good option at kicker. I think Nebraska will have those two battle it out again going into next season. I could see a situation where maybe Tristan Alvano or John Hull is a kickoff specialist, and then one handles the place kicking duties. I could see an option where Tristan Alvano is your guy inside 40 or 30 yards, and John Hull is your long range guy. They're going to track all of this in spring and fall camp. One of them, I imagine, will be the main guy, but they at least do have options with 2 solid options at kicker. Nebraska has addressed the long snapper issues. They've brought in FCS All-American Kevin Galick. So one of the 2 parts of the issues on special teams is solved. The other one we got to figure out is how do we block? We can't keep allowing block punts and block kicks, but part of that is long snappers. If we got a long snapper that can do his job, get the ball back to the holder of the punter quickly and efficiently without looping the ball in like they did against Boston College on the block punt, I think we'll be okay.
Kevin Gaelick's going to be your starter next season, and probably the guys that were snapping this year will never play again. I can't imagine why we'd need them. Washington punter Jack McAllister is coming over for one more season. On the year, he had 35 punts for an average of 44 yards with a long of 62. He's very similar to Brian Buschini. I think Nebraska did a good job identifying a punter with 1 year of eligibility that's going to be able to help Camden Cook before he fully takes over the reins in 2026. Because Camden Cook is going to be a stud at punter if he's anything remotely close to what his father was. Kick return and punt return, obviously issues this season. Nebraska has addressed that through the portal as well. One guy that we're going to talk about in the secondary is going to be an option for Nebraska at kick and punt return. We're talking Andrew Marshall. The Idaho FCS transfer defensive back was an elite kick returner and a really good punt returner for Idaho. He has 8 total kickoff returns this past season, 327 yards, and a touchdown with an average of just under 41 yards per return. His touchdown was a 100-yard kickoff return for the touchdown, so you can take that out of the equation. Still, 7 returns, 227 yards, solid option at kick return. On punt returns, he had 14 of them on the season. He averaged about 11 yards per return, and he had 1 touchdown. That's a lot more than Nebraska has had. I can't think of the last time outside of DeMornay Pearson-L, so we're going back to the Bo Pelini era, where Nebraska had a legit option at kick return, or I'm sorry, at punt returner and kick return too, really, but mainly at punt return. It's been a disaster with IGC back there. Whoever's been returning punts, they've not had time. The blocking's been terrible, so it'll be good to have a guy back there that is an option and a legit threat at punt returner. Another option at kick returner could be Ja'Cory Barney. He had 4 kickoff returns on the season. He averaged about 21 yards per return. He didn't have a lot of opportunities at punt return. Part of that is just scheme. Nebraska's scheme or blocking or whatever just was a disaster. Special teams was a complete failure in every aspect, so I don't want to grade him too harshly on his punt returns. It seemed like when he had room, when he had time, he did have a decent return average. But the problem is when he was returning, and when he was, did he have time? It just seemed like there was no blocking in front of him at all. Nebraska's used Quentin Ives a couple of times on the season at kick return, so he could be an option. He averaged about 19 yards per kick return this season. He only had 3 returns, though, so not a lot of volume to go with any projection for me. I just don't think he's a guy that has like top-end elite speed to be a kick returner, but Nebraska thinks a lot higher of him than I do, apparently. Matt Rhule is routinely really kind of played up Quentin Ives and his potential at Nebraska, but I haven't seen a lot of it going into 3 years at Nebraska. There's 3 legit track stars, though. 3 legit guys that have top-end track speed that play football at Nebraska. Jeremiah Charles, Bryce Turner, and Demetrius Bell. All those guys were primarily track guys before they started playing football. All of them only played like 1 or 2 years of high school football. Their goal was to go Division I in track. And then Nebraska came in and said, hey, you can play football and play track at Nebraska. So they came and they're doing both. They're obviously an option, I think, just based on their speed alone at either kick and or punt return. Walk-on Kenneth Walker was your starting kick returner for the bowl game. He had like 1 or 2 returns, 15, 20 yards each. He's an option as well. But on to the secondary. This area does have some concerns for me. We didn't see them play particularly well this season. A lot of that was the issues with the safeties. There was just a lot of blown coverages. There was missed tackles. And it's not a knock on Gifford or Singleton. It just felt like they were out of position constantly. As great of leaders as they are, they did not have their best year this past season. Gift's best game came in the bowl game. But the other 12 games he played in, he just struggled quite a bit. It seemed like there's a lot of coverages busted. Guys were getting open deep routinely. So I think this is an area where Nebraska gets better through natural attrition, meaning graduation. John Butler has started an overhaul in the secondary. He's brought in a handful of transfers, and there's one thing that sticks out to me. Size. He wants bigger corners. He doesn't like the 5'7", 5'8", 5'9" corners, talking about Malcolm Hartzog. I think he moves back to safety, which we're going to get to here in a second. It's not a knock on Malcolm. He's just not a very big guy. John Butler is going to want these 6'2", 6'3" corners with long, rangy arms and speed to burn. One thing I've noticed is how young Nebraska's secondary is, and really their overall roster, but in particular, their secondary is very young. There's a lot of freshmen that redshirted. There's a lot of redshirt freshmen that didn't play a ton. There's just so much young talent that we haven't seen play consistently. So that's why I say it's kind of a room with some question marks. Isaac Gifford and Deshaun Singleton are graduating. So what are Nebraska's options at safety? I think Nebraska is going to move Marquise Buford back to safety. I think Malcolm Hartzog is going to go back to safety. He cannot play corner. It's not a thing. It's nothing against Malcolm Hartzog. He's just a small guy. He's 5'8". He's 180 pounds. The Big Ten has big receivers. Even Ja'Cory Barney is a skinny guy, but he's not small. He's 6 foot, 6'1". He just needs to add some weight. That's part of coming in and playing as a 17-year-old true freshman. He didn't have a lot of time to add a bunch of weight. He'll probably gain 10, 15 pounds, is my guess, but they want to retain his speed. But look at who else is on Nebraska's roster. Look who they brought in. That's not uncommon for the Big Ten. That's the expectation for the Big Ten. Big-bodied, physical receivers. Quinn Clark, redshirted this year. He's 6'4", 6'5", 215 pounds. Keelan Smith, he redshirted this season. He's 6'3", 220. They brought in Dane Key from Kentucky, 6'2", 210. They brought in Isaiah Hunter from California. He's 6'2", 210. There's a lot of size in Nebraska's receiver room and across the Big Ten. So I think Malcolm fits better at safety. He plays better in zone coverage anyway. He led the team in interceptions, and I would bet almost every single one of his interceptions came from being in zone coverage. He does a great job of reading the quarterback. That's why I think they move him back to safety. They really brought him and Marquise down to corner because they had enough depth at safety, but not enough depth at corner, especially when Tommy Hill went down. A few other options to keep an eye out for at safety would be Caleb Benning, natural athletic genes. His father played running back at Nebraska, as you know, Damon Benning. He's the Nebraska color commentator now. He redshirted in 2024. Good size, 5'11", 200 pounds. We saw him play a little bit sparingly throughout the year. We saw him in the bowl game. He played fairly well. He gets another year to develop. Another guy, the younger brother of Marquise Buford, Mario Buford. I'm a huge fan of Mario Buford. He's a little light, though. He's about 180 pounds. At least that's what he's listed at on Huskers.com. He's 6 foot, so he's got the height. He just needs to add a little bit of weight. That weight is probably even not updated. They'll redo all that come spring and fall. He's going to be probably closer to 190, 195, I'd guess, by the time the season starts. He's a consensus 4-star recruit that came out last season. He saw a lot of snaps against Ohio State. He played fairly well in the action he saw this year. And one thing that stood out to me was he is a thumper. That dude lays the wood. He is not afraid of any contact. Nebraska also landed Georgia transfer Justin Rhett, another consensus 4-star recruit when he was in high school. He could be a corner. He could be a safety. He's got size for both. He's 6 foot, 6'1", 190 or so pounds. I believe Georgia had him at safety last season. And then the rover position, that's a position that I think Dasan McCullough, who we talked about in our last video, that's a spot I could see him also taking over. He's 6'4", 6'5"-ish, 230, 235, maybe 240. Big guy, can cover, started his career at safety. He could be your rover for next season. Another option would be Ramir Stewart. He was a consensus 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He had like 30 or 40 Division I offers as a high school recruit. Good size, 6 foot, 210. We saw him in limited action this year. He did have the one interception. I can't remember what game it was. I think it was a UTEP. Might have been UTEP where he had the interception. He's a guy that was down on the depth chart and then made a move in fall camp. So I'm curious, does he continue to make that move going into next season? Braylon Prude would be an option, but he is more of a developmental guy to keep tabs on over the next year or two. Nebraska found Braylon at a satellite camp in Texas. He didn't really have any interest or any offers at that time. There was no Power 4, not even really any Group of 5 schools that had offered him at that point. But when you find a guy that's 6'4" and he's 200 plus pounds, he's rangy, he has speed, he demonstrates an ability to cover, he demonstrates an ability and a willingness to come into the box and lay the wood on some people. he had traits Nebraska, in particular Matt Rule, values in guys that are more so important than the football side of things, because he's more of the believer is you can turn an athlete into a football player. So they look at these track times, they look at long jump, they look at all these different little measurables that demonstrate that that person is an elite athlete. Now it's just a matter of turning him into a football player. Taking a look at the cornerbacks, Nebraska has Syer Wright coming back next season. He is like the big bright spot for last season. He came in super late as a transfer from USC. I believe he got here in July. He's got good size. He's 6 foot, 190-ish pounds. He had, 2 interceptions. He had a pick 6 against his former team, USC. He had the sack fumble against Illinois. So he demonstrated really quickly, once he got acclimated to the system, an ability to make plays. He also blocked a field goal attempt, I believe, against USC as well. So I really like Syer's right ability to consistently make plays. He was a lockdown corner when he came in against Illinois for the injured Tommy Hill. That's your cornerback one on one side of the field. Who is going to be the option on the other side? That's the area we need to focus on. A guy to keep tabs on would be Donovan Jones. He saw his first extensive action in the Pinstripe Bowl. He played 55 snaps. He originally started his career at Nebraska, which was just this past season, at safety. They decided to roll him down to corner for the Pinstripe Bowl prep, and they said, okay, this kid's got something at corner. Good size. He's 6'1". He's about 200 pounds. He only gave up 1 catch in the Pinstripe Bowl, which was tremendous for a true freshman that really saw the most action he'd seen in the previous 12 games combined because he redshirted. He's a guy I'd say who's probably going to be on your 2 deep. I don't think he's a starter next season. He could push for a starting role, certainly. I think Nebraska's just added some legit guys at corner options from the portal that just at least gives Donovan another year to develop, still get some more playing time going into 2025. Amari Sanders is another guy, another Florida kid that performed well this year. He's a guy Nebraska signed super late in the 2023-2024 class. So this was his this was his freshman season at Nebraska. He did redshirt. When he did play, he played fairly well. We saw him in the Pinstripe Bowl. I like what I see from Amari Sanders, another guy with good size. He's in that 6'1", 6'2" range. He's 200 plus pounds. He's got long, rangy arms. He's got the ability to be on the 2 deep, I think, going into next season. And a guy we've talked about already, Andrew Marshall, the FCS transfer from Idaho. He would be my pick to lock down the opposite side of Syer Wright, another corner with size. You're kind of seeing a trend here with these guys. 6'1", 190. He had major Power 4 interest coming out of the portal. His final 2 were Nebraska and Miami, 2 teams with a war chest for NIL, and Nebraska landed him. So he's going to be your guy. Opposite of Syer Wright would be my guess. Another FCS transfer that came in last year to keep tabs on. He spent most of last year hurt. He looked to be the starter next to Tommy Hill, but then Nebraska lost Tommy Hill. But then Nebraska also lost this guy, and we're talking Bly Hill. He's a big, big corner. He's 6'3". He's over 200 pounds. He's got like a 6'11" wingspan, so he's got these long arms. The big thing for him is, can he get fully healthy? And if he is fully healthy, is he able to be where he was when Nebraska first brought him in from the FCS ranks? There's one guy in the 2025 class I think could come in and make an impact. He's not going to be your starter, but he could be a guy that's backing up Syer Wright or Andrew Marshall. Worst case scenario, I think he's a rotational guy. He's on that 3 deep part in the cornerback room. We're talking consensus 4-star Bryson Weber. He's coming to Nebraska in shape. He's coming to Nebraska physically ready. He's 6'3". He's 190 pounds. He's got a 7-foot wingspan, and he can run. He's a guy to keep tabs on because I think once he arrives, he's going to make his presence known. He could be our corner of the future. He's a potential NFL guy 3 years down the road. I'm super high on Bryson Weber. Nebraska identified him when he was just a low 3-star recruit. He comes out, he balls out his senior season, does a tremendous job, gets his 4th star, deservedly so. Nebraska did land Jameer Khan from Southern Illinois. He's an FCS transfer that had some group of 5 interests. He was originally committed to James Madison, Then Nebraska comes in and they swoop up. They take him. He's signed, sealed, delivered. He'll be enrolling here in a couple of weeks. This is a guy, Jameer Khan, with more ties to Kansas City. He played for Jamar Mosey at Lee Summit North. So this is a guy he's familiar with. He's going to vouch for his character. He's going to vouch for his abilities. He's going to bring him in, another guy from Kansas City for the Huskers. But that's all I've got for today. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Stay tuned. We've got another episode dropping. We're talking Nebraska basketball, their big victory over 15th ranked UCLA. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for joining me along this journey, and welcome in to the Cornhusker Huddle.